Hi everyone, so today I'm going to be showing you one of these frame repair kits and my whole process of putting it on. As you can see, I have a major problem. My entire bracket here to connect to my frame for my rear control arm, this is on the passenger side, is completely rusted through. So obviously I cannot drive this right now with it like that. So I'm going to show you the whole process of how I did it with one of those frame restoration kits for this exact situation. So first things first, got to jack it up, get the tire off so I can access everything. And before I even really do that, I'm going to put some WD-40 on all of these bolts. There's some on the back too. Just to start penetrating so that hopefully these come off easier. Obviously, this is a very rust-filled Jeep, so probably going to run into issues there. So let's go ahead and get started. Did some pretty intense mudding on my last outing with this, and it sat for a while. So the undercarriage is just coated in mud, and I have a sneaking suspicion but that was the cause of it. As you can see, the inside of my rim really caked in mud, but obviously isn't going to be balanced. So I'm guessing this vibration, because I towed it, flat towed it behind after I went mudding. Sneaking suspicion this is what set it off. Was all of that. So if you go out mudding, make sure you at least get all of your rims, all the mud off of there. So probably being out of rotation or out of sync there, spinning for a couple of hours, being towed behind, probably vibrated that loose. I think it was already rusted, obviously not nearly that bad. But I don't think that helped. Alright, so to get this big bolt off here, again, I would probably use some WD-40 to loosen it up first. It's, funnily enough, I needed, well, I guess it's essentially the same thing. I used a 13/16 on one side, and then on the other side I used a 21mm, and that's what worked. It's on there super tight. Obviously, this whole frame was kind of moving around as I was loosening it. Kind of freaked me out a little, but I mean, it's barely connected as it is, so I guess what's it matter. I would highly recommend using a 6-sided bit instead of these, or 6-point instead of a 12-point, especially on these super tight bolts. You really don't want to strip them, and you're much higher risk of doing that with a 12-point. So these 16-point or 6 points are way better. So go ahead and do that first after you get your tire off, get it up in the air. So to fully get that lower control arm off, you're probably gonna have to loosen this end. That was the only way. I was hammering at it, taking a crowbar to it, and it just was not coming. So I had to loosen it. I just said don't use a 12-point, but literally all I had that would fit there. As you could see, so you're supposed to have easy access to the upper control arm there, but it looks like mine bent or something. I can't quite tell. It kind of looks like it bent there. So I'm gonna have to figure out what I'm gonna do there. I might have to take my exhaust off, because there's a 15mm bolt. You have to take this upper arm off, and there's a 15mm bolt right here, and then you can see the other side in here. I'm likely gonna have to take my exhaust off, or potentially just cut some of this off. I don't know, we'll see. Anyways, finally loosen all this, and then you're able to just pry this off, and then finally get a screwdriver through here, pry it all the way down. This is so bad I was gonna see on camera. I bet you this will come right off. Look at that. Get that. Great design, huh? Look at that. Worthless. Alright, so I got the lower control arm out of the way there. Obviously my bracketing is all bent. But anyways, there's a 15mm bolt. I'd use a wrench because this is on the passenger side with my muffler right there, so it might have been easier to just get that out of the way. I might have to remove that anyways to be able to weld back in here, so we'll see. Next you have the sway arm right here. It is connected onto the frame with a 19mm bolt right there that you're going to need to take off. So go ahead and do that next. With that sway bar connector out of the way there, you can just move it out of the way towards the spring. You are ready to start cutting or tearing off, as I already have started doing. We'll need to start cutting the frame next. Alright, so I got my part in. Wanted to explain a couple of things real quick. I mentioned you have to take the side step off. I guess technically you don't, at least with the one that I purchased, and I'll link in the description. You can see it doesn't extend past this body mount here. You can see it just kind of perfectly will fit in here. So you don't technically have to. I would still recommend it. You're gonna have so much more room to work. So obviously make sure that everything matches up. The nice giant manufacturer flaw was to not have a hole in the bottom there for draining, which is idiotic because you remember there's a hole here, so of course you're driving through rain or snow. Of course it's going to flick water up in there, and then it just was sitting down here on that piece there. Of course it's going to rust. I can't believe somebody didn't think that through, but simple hole there for drainage. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and start marking this off and then get to cutting. So, to mark it off, it's going to be really hard with this bracket specifically here. You're really not going to be able to do this, but you're just going to cut up in here as best as you can. But for the rest of it, you're going to take some chalk and essentially from the top down, just mark about 1.5 inches all the way across for your bracket, so that you have 1.5 inches of the original frame sticking down, because you're going to be welding on here. So go ahead and mark all of it, and then basically take a cutter and start hacking away at it. Definitely recommend gloves, long sleeve shirt. I need to put one on. And eye protection as you start cutting, because you want to be safe. So go ahead and mark it and then start cutting it so that we can measure this up and put it in there correctly. So there's one last bracket to actually undo. I'm sorry, I'm kind of zoomed in here, but on the back side here, here's all your brackets for everything for your upper control arm and your sway bar stabilizer that you probably already undone. But there is also an exhaust, just because for me, for how long this is, there is an exhaust bracket right there. So if you already took your muffler off, you're probably fine. But there's two half an inch bolts right there that need to come out. And I'll have to figure it out later, because whereas marking right there, I believe, you can kind of see my blue line there. I believe that'll kind of, I don't know, cut through those. I'm going to have to be careful. I'm going to see if I can avoid cutting those out so that I can screw these back in. But I believe I'll have to drill a hole through my new, because there's no hole there for it, and I believe it'll cover those, so I'm probably gonna have to drill through that. But see, the one nice thing with having this all gone, I had one of them snap. So careful with that. You might have the same issue. So I have one stuck in there now, but it seemed pretty sturdy with just one bolt, so it might be fine. We'll have to see. Alright, so cutting with an angle grinder, it's taken a lot longer than I was hoping it would. So as you can see, I basically had to cut this just to be able to get an angle on here to be able to cut it. So I'm going to start cutting along here. I am pretty sure I'm going to have to remove both the upper control arm and the sway bar connection right there, just so I have more room to work. And I might have to remove my muffler. I'm just having a hard time getting good angles on stuff. So this honestly would be easiest if you had like a torch cutter. That seems like that would be easiest, but I don't. So just got to keep working at it. So I'm finally to the point of being ready to weld this on. And your last couple of things, as you can see, you really need just plain metal there. You can't have paint or rust or anything. So I went through and angle grinded all of this. So I have a good contact point for all of the welds. I'm not 100% sure, but I basically just centered this piece onto that bracket there for placement on that. That's what made the most sense to me. As you can see, my lower control arm doesn't line up. That's okay. I've read when people replace these online. Basically, this is a pretty common thing that happens when you disconnect the control arm, especially because I had such a hard time getting this on. The only way I could get this on was to angle grind the interior here at an angle. Maybe I'll show you in just a sec. Was the only way I could get that on. I was hammering it, and it just would not go. I was trying to angle grind the frame, and it wasn't working. That was the only. I really didn't like doing that though, taking metal off of here in order to get it on, because that's metal that was intended to be welded to here. So I really didn't like it, but that was the only way I could get this on. So obviously with all the hammering and moving stuff around, that moved that back. It's not a big deal. It'll probably be a decent amount of work, but afterwards I'm going to use some ratchets and ratchet straps, and I've also heard probably jacking on the other side of the axle will help angle that better. The upper control arm, I have it completely off, but it's the same. I can tell it's off by a little bit. Also, now would be a good time. As you can see, my bushings are really bad. To replace those, either replace the bushings or just the entire control arm. If you order it all online, it's like an extra $40 or $50 to just buy the entire control arm. Doesn't really seem worth the hassle to me. That's for both sides, a total of 4. 2 uppers and 2 lowers. Doesn't really seem worth the time and hassle to me. But if you want, you can just replace the bushings, unless your control arm is really bent, but mine seems fine. So let's go ahead and get this welded up. So I just wanted to show you what I was talking about. I haven't done it on this one because this is the bracket for the driver's side, but I literally had to take an angle grinder and basically just at a small angle like this, just grind it all. That was the only way to get the bracket to fit on. So, which again, I really didn't like doing, but I just slowly took a little bit off, a little bit of that edge in order to have it fit on, and it popped right on once I did that. Obviously I have that because I'm just doing the one side. However, you can see this side needs it too. So here is the finished welded on project. It's not perfect, but to be completely honest, anything is better than what it was. So I'm much happier with this than what it was. So, couple of things. What I did was I did measure from the front control arm, basically eye hole to eye hole, and matched it to the other side. And then when I do that side, I'll do the same and match it to this side. So, to try to keep this as best aligned as I could, because there was some wiggle room there. And so I lined it up so that it was exactly the same as the other side. That's what I did. So I'll do the same on the other. The other thing is that so you have these little brackets for the sway bar and the upper control arm. There's an exhaust piece back in here. And essentially what I did was I just welded it on, because the holes for that actually are covered by your bracket. So it's just a little brace for the exhaust. You can see the lining here goes to the exhaust over to that bracket. So there's plenty of room for the sway bar to go onto this bracket, and then the upper control arm to go onto there. There are definitely some areas, and honestly you're just gonna have to do the best you can. It is dang near impossible to get up there and up here, so just do what you can. Again, this is just kind of a band-aid fix. And then what you need to do is you need to spray paint all of this. And I probably should have done it, and kind of wished I had done it before I put it on. However, you'd still have to touch up after you weld. My main reasoning is that I wish I had spray painted in this piece before I welded it on. I would definitely be doing that on the other one. But you want to protect this from future rusting. So you need to get some spray paint that is rust resistant that you can put on there to prevent rust. You can either get a primer, or I got a 2-in-1, primer and paint. I just got black to match. So go ahead and after it's welded and cooled down, go ahead and spray paint it if you didn't do that first. Alright, so a couple of tips on the control arms. I'm sure you're going to have the same issue as me, to where it's not going to line up perfectly. So you can see I used a series of ratchets, actually jacking on kind of the center of the diff right there is what made the difference. I never removed the exhaust, so I've been messing with the upper control arm first. I never removed it, and I just got this perfectly. You can just kind of hand screw that in to get it just around the angle, just perfectly. So anyways, that is how my old one was taken off. So I completely replaced these control arms. I'll include a link. It was like, I think $87 for all four, because obviously I'm going to do the other side, so there's no way those bushings are good either. So that was how I did it. Basically, yeah, jacking on the diff there on the center is what finally did it, and then essentially just hooking onto the axle, just hooking into here and just cranking that down super tight. That was the only way I could do it. I was trying to go in the center. As you can see, that's loose. Didn't even really need it. I'm going to loosen it, and I bet you I'm going to have the same issue, because I could tell. See, it's over tight for the lower. It's perfect for the upper, too tight for the lower. I might have to reverse this and basically hook on, you know, back onto the bumper or something, and or actually, you know what, I'll just hook onto one of these, probably hook into there. It's probably what I'm gonna have to do for this. I will get you the torque specs for these in just a second. So here's the torque specifications. They're called, in my book, they call them the suspension arm, both upper and lower. So you could see, since this is a 99, both of the upper arms are 55. since I'm earlier than 2006, and then the lower arm on both ends is 103 foot-pounds. So I was reading online, and it makes sense. Well, I guess I should specify too, I did not notice these markings on mine to mark exactly where your bolt was. If you have that, be sure to use it. Probably a little late for that if you've gotten to this point in the video. But you could also mark, and I probably should have, I will on the next one, mark exactly where that was so that you can hopefully align that perfectly. There really isn't much wiggle room on mine, so I don't know that it matters. I was reading online that it makes more sense to lower everything, put the wheel back on, basically have it how it's going to sit, and then torque it down. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and torque all of those to those specifications. So definitely comment on it and remind me over time, and I can let you know how this holds up. And go ahead and test it out. Nothing too hardcore because I want to do the other side first. And I'll be closely monitoring it probably over the next year at least of riding, because I don't do too much, to make sure that it holds up. So anyways, that is how you can put this band-aid on here if you're having issues with your control arm rusting out like I was. So hopefully this was helpful, and thanks for watching.